Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, Mr. Raspy Voice himself, Jason Rasputin Johnston Yellen. How you doing there?
Yes. Yeah, Raspy definitely sums it up. I had an absolute blast at Premier Drams yesterday and spent a lot of time shouting at the top of my lungs at various nation members and One Nation Under Whiskey listeners. It was a lot of fun. And even by the time I got home last night, the family were kind of like, what happened to you? I presented for 3 hours and I talked before we started and I talked after we finished. And here I am after sitting in the car for 2 hours not talking to anybody. So here we are. I live to tell the tale.
So Premier Drams, for those that may not have heard in previous episodes or simply may not live in and around the Washington, D.C. area, what is that event?
Yeah, so it's an annual whiskey festival put on by Jack Rose Dining Saloon, run by Bill Thomas, and we were in their main structure, which is Jack Rose. It's got the downstairs, which is kind of a whiskey library. It's got the upstairs, which is a tiki bar with a retractable roof. It was a gorgeous day in DC, and the roof was retracted, and I was a happy camper while shouting at the top of my lungs. And then there's another venue just a couple doors down from Jack Rose called Imperial, and there were vendors in there. There's a bottle shop in there, and they also have a rooftop. And so we transitioned from Jack Rose, where the pouring was, to then Imperial, where I had a cheeky wee pint to try and calm the vocal cords, and again chatted with more nation members and One Nation Under Whiskey listeners. It was a lot of fun.
There you go.
A lot of fun. Yeah, I saw our good friend Jared Card there.
Oh yeah,
he was pouring just a couple of people down from me. Our very good friend Visger came in from Moscow, Idaho, with his wife, Cherish. And they were moving between the buildings and having a lot of fun. And got to retaste. I'm laughing because I'm going to have a follow-up point in just a second. But I got to retaste the Jack Rose Lafroig single cask. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast. It's a French oak.
Yeah, 9-year-old French oak.
Is that the age on it? Yeah, I knew it was single digits. $250 a bottle. It is cracking. It's really, really good. And I will say this. If you go along to Jack Rose, a pour of it is $22. And it's hard to spend $22 any better in a bar on a $250 bottle.
There you go.
I'm actually quite surprised it's a $22 pour. But
for
the
an
reason I'm laughing... I was being purposely vague. I think it is an ounce.
Okay.
I don't think it's a 2-ounce pour at Jack Rose. But it might be. Who knows? I just show up at Jack Rose and whiskey appears in front of me. So, fwa, fwa, fwa. But the reason I'm laughing is I had our new Westland on the table, on the bar top.
Oh, yeah.
And I ended up talking to numerous people about the Jack Rose Westland in Mezcal. And everybody loves that dram. It is an incredibly successful pairing of Westland and Mezcal. I am then also pleased to say that our peated Westland in Pinot de Charon cask went over fantastically well also.
9 years too.
And we sell it via lottery. So Bill Thomas's, you just go downstairs and you buy yourself a bottle so long as it's still available. For us, there's a little bit of luck involved, and you want to get your name pulled out the hat or the tombola, however we wish to do it.
So 9 years Pinot de Charon. I mean, I know we're going to talk about that a little later on in the episode.
Absolutely.
But all of which, as of the recording of this, or I should say as of the dropping of this episode, that Westland was bottled 8 days ago. Right?
Yep.
Pretty damn wild.
Yeah, I said that to many people who came by, and they said, I think I own that Westland. And this was on the Sunday, and I said, it was bottled on Tuesday, and we haven't released it yet. And then there were people who said, I think I've had that Virginia Distillery Company. Same thing. I said, no, it was bottled on Tuesday. and they were like, all right, let me taste it. And then they tasted it. And then we got to talk STR, right? Nice. As opposed to, the sherry butt of our first Virginia Distillery Company. Now we've got STR going on. But again, I don't want to lead too much. We have some early business to get to in today's episode before we circle back to our own cask discussion.
Yeah, so every once in a while, you and I take a break from inviting guests to the podcast, interviewees, friends, people within the industry, sometimes to catch up and sometimes to do a little bit of a listicle, if you will. And you and I want to say maybe 3-4 episodes ago, I don't know how. It's funny. For the past 3.5 years, we've been saying, how does time work? We still don't know how time works, but here we are. We got it into our head that we should probably do a listicle of our top American whiskeys. We didn't limit it to bourbon, rye, American single malt. But why did we say let's do this? Do you recall?
Well, I'm just laughing because every time you say listicle, I think about what exists on the internet as a quick click for people. And you and I are about to spend 2 hours going over our so-called listicle. I think ours is simply a list. The ickle is non-existent for us. I honestly listen. I don't remember. I do remember you and me saying, we really should put together a list. I don't know. We were quoting something or tasting something, or we had a price on something. It was very pertinent when we had the conversation. And then you and I both kind of went away and thought, all right, what are our lists? Yeah. What are our fives that need to be on people's shelves? We've done it for Scotch, and that was a ton of fun. I just recently listened back to that episode. Mm-hmm. Stand by my 5. I firmly believe you stand by your 5.
Oh yeah.
And now I'm really curious. It was also fun listening back to the Scotch episode where we spent about 20 minutes articulating the rules, and we're adding rules as we were setting the rules. But it's interesting for me, just as a bit of backstory. Growing up in Scotland, bourbon, as we like to call it,
bourbon
didn't really. Bourbon, yeah. You talk to anybody in Scotland about their bourbon casks and say, oh yeah, we really value our bourbon casks. Like Ian McAllister says it all the time at Glen Scotia. Ian Allen has said it at Glen Murray. Okay. Bourbon. And so that's how we grew up with it. But it wasn't on my radar. Wasn't really a thing. Obviously, Scotch guy through and through. And moved to America and started kind of tasting America's spirit. And it was kind of sweet, and it was kind of cloying, and sometimes it was kind of plasticky. And so I've had my own journey of finding out, what do I like? What works for me? What fits my palate? And in making my selections for today, I've really charted my own course here through American spirits discovery. Okay. And I'm really excited to convey that to the listeners. To my original point here, I'm really curious to see how you curate your list, because you have had a shit ton more bourbon than me for a long time. And so I'm curious how you have managed to bring this down to 5 areas of focus.
It wasn't easy. It was far from easy because, when you and I originally talked about it, we said, well, top 10. But then we remember that we record one of the longest industry podcasts that there are. And if we did a top 10, this would be a 4-hour episode rather than a 2-hour episode. So whittling it down to 5 was difficult. And as I was doing this, I was trying to remember, have we done this before? Did we do this 3 years ago? Did we do it 5 years ago? I know we did our Scotch one. As I was thinking about that, I said, it doesn't matter. I think lists can change, should change, depending on new things that have come out, depending on your own palate changing. I mean, to your point, my guess is as you go through your list, you're going to say, just as you said before, American spirits just didn't fit my palate right. But then as you built context through having more and more, you discovered the things that you did like, and discovered qualities of that spirit that maybe you didn't appreciate as much early days, and therefore you evolved. So if we've gone through this before, and I can't remember, I do remember the Scotch whiskey one. We didn't do American? Okay.
No, we've definitely done it though, where we've talked about a house favorite, and we've talked about transitions with house favorites, and we've definitely, and the whiskey we've tasted together on this podcast, we've definitely named bourbons and ryes and American single malts along the way. Today is our focused list. Okay. This is this is our first dedicated episode to a 5 and 5.
Okay, so for the listener's sake, because we didn't discuss rules of why your 5 is your 5 or why my 5 is my 5.
Yeah.
What were your rules? What got you to this 5?
So I stuck to our Scotch rules. Mm-hmm. So I kept it to OBs, official bottlings, distillery bottlings, liquid put out by bricks and mortar distilleries. Mm-hmm. I did have a couple of close calls on sourced liquid that, I saw Dave Schmier at Premier Drams.
Yeah, there you go.
And he had a T-shirt on that was "Sourcing is not a crime."
I've seen that.
So I didn't pick a couple of sourced bottles that I like a lot. I didn't pick them because sourcing is a crime. I didn't pick them because I really want to keep this to OB and not go down a secondary bottling line or even an independent bottling line. There is an interesting point here that I'm going to make as my selections go along. I think now that I look at my 5, I think my only rule was bricks and mortar OB. I'm not going to say any more because I'm going to give the game away on what I've got sitting beside me here. So that guided me. You, Joshua?
Mine similar to you. The 5 bottlings I chose are bottlings by the producer. It's not sourced liquid. I agree with Dave Schmier of Proof and Wood that sourcing is not a crime, but I wanted this to be something directly from a producer that had wide availability, right? So from the producer themselves, wide availability. For a couple of them, it was a sheer affordability. The others are priced a bit higher, I would argue, based on the way we've seen people purchase over the past 5 to 10 years. The higher price points that I'll mention as we go along it's not unobtainium, we're not dealing with crazy secondary pricing or anything like that. This is standard retail pricing that just happens to be higher than some of the others, but still not unobtainium. And then the other,
just very quickly on that point is I I did have price in mind. I didn't go esoteric. I didn't pick expensive one-offs.
Yep.
I maybe haven't gone widely available, but I have had an eye on available.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say a little bit more on that as I go through my selections as well. But yeah, we both had price and sensible price in mind.
Yeah, and with availability, I include being able to walk into your store or finding a shop that can ship to you, just fairly available. And that was basically it. And one last thing, they're just bottles that I reach for. They're bottles that I think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
yeah, that's imperative.
It's just, they're bottles that if they weren't on my shelf, I'd be sad because I'd want to break it open. I'd want to share it with friends. So there you go. So those were my rules.
Yeah, I think we're both very much in the same wheelhouse. So in the interest of some funsies, do you want to kick us off?
I will kick us off. So I remember years ago, I'm going to pour it actually. I remember years ago
Keep it out of the video screen. I've got my eyes tightly closed.
Well, let me ask you this. Do I mention the type of spirit? Am I just giving you tasting notes?
Yeah, I'm not going to be trying to guess anything. I just, as you're describing it, I want to be in the dark as much as the listener is.
Okay. Then that's actually going to change a little bit. Okay, well, let me say this. Years ago, there was a particular...
And tell me when I can open my eyes again.
You can open them.
Okay.
Years ago, I remember wanting to have a bottle that I could suggest to anyone, that I think would please anyone, specifically malt drinkers that were interested in American whiskey. And so I was keen to not pick a bourbon because, to your point, for a malt whiskey drinker, and I'm not talking about peated whiskey, I'm just simply talking single malt whiskey, which is nowhere near as sweet as bourbon. I wanted something that had spice that would balance out the sweetness that the oak imparts. And I also wanted something that was affordable and just drank like a champ. And so, do I mention that? Well, this is what I'll say about what it was. It was 50% alcohol. It was, at the time, I think it was maybe $18 to $22 on the shelf, maybe reaching $25 on the shelf. This bottling is still available. However, I found another producer that does a similar thing. It's 50% alcohol. You'll find it on the shelf for about $25. There's a good bit of spice going on to balance out some of the sweetness. But for this particular one, the reason why I've switched from suggesting that previous one to this one is within the mash bill, there's, I could be wrong on this, but there's more malted barley in the mash bill. This mash bill has about 20% malted barley. So you've got a good backbone, like a good nuttiness going on with this one.
So was the previous recommendation Rittenhouse Rye?
Bing, 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 bing. That's a bingo.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Yeah, same, right? It's not in my 5, but it easily could have been, and certainly one that early doors, as a malt drinker, as you're describing, it was absolutely there for me.
Yeah.
Price point was ridiculous, ridiculously low. Yeah, so there you go. That's nice. Props for Rittenhouse Rye. I now have no idea what your recommendation is in place of Rittenhouse Rye. So I think the stage is beautifully set. What's the replacement? Or do you want to give us some notes?
Yeah, why don't I give you some? Well, I'll give you some notes. All right. So first off,
glug glug
glug glug glug. On the nose, there's this sort of bright cherry, this sort of Bing cherry going on. That's supplemented by this really wonderful herbaceous quality. Think like Think like fresh mustard, like fresh. What's that mustard with the grains? The whole grain mustard.
Whole grain mustard.
Yeah, think some of that like spice coming through, some of the herbaceousness coming through. There's dill for sure, but we're not talking like the 95.5 dill, like the MGP dill. It's sweeter than that dill. There's also, I would argue, this is a bit sweeter than Rittenhouse rye. But hold on, let me go back to the nose. It's sweeter than the Rittenhouse rye, but that malted barley really brings through this sort of like, you call them monkey nuts, I'll just call them salted peanuts, but still in the shell on there. So spice, sweet corn, the salted peanuts, and then you've got that wonderful just sort of oak spice and this overarching vanilla that kind of ties it all together. The mouthfeel is tremendous, by the way. It's silky, despite it being 50% alcohol.
So this is a 50% alcohol or 100 proof rye? Question mark?
It is a rye.
Yeah, I'm not going to guess. What is it? What state is it from? And then follow us up.
So this is easy. This is Kentucky straight rye whiskey. This is Old Forester's rye. This is just their standard 100 proofer. I think I spent $24 on the bottle. I think, typically you can find it for around $25.99. Green label on it. Just an absolute solid drinker that is good in and of itself, as I can attest to, as I'm drinking it just now. But make a nice rye Negroni out of it. Make a nice rye old fashioned out of it, and it just sings. It sings because it has so much character that it'll shine, right? Like if you put it in a Negroni, which I've done before, the vermouth doesn't overtake it. There's enough spice to combat the sweetness of the sweet vermouth. And enough nuttiness to sort of combat the bitterness of the Campari, right? It really rounds out that drink in a nice way if you don't want to deal with the gin.
Yeah, I have a bottle of this sitting in my house. It's not out here in my office, but it is in my house.
I think I bought you a bottle. And yes.
it is a cracker. It is well worth drinking. That's funny though. In all of this, I hadn't picked up that you transitioned from the Rittenhouse recommendation to the Old Forester recommendation. But
do
you find a significant mouthfeel difference between the two?
I find Rittenhouse has a bit more heat, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I think it's okay for whiskey to have heat to it, and I would argue that it's heat, not spice. So there's nothing wrong with that. This, I think it kind of ties back to what I was saying before when I said, geez, have we done this list before? And if we had, it's okay because palates change, right? And what you reach for changes. And I don't know if I can tie it to a specific date in history where I said, and from this day forth, I shall drink the Old Forester rye. I think I just grabbed a bottle, went through it, and then grabbed another, and and here we are. So, yeah.
Oh, that's a cracking start. That is really terrific to hear.
Right, and it's everywhere, and it's going to be about $25. It's 50% alcohol. Full on flavor. There's absolutely no bad marks against it.
I am currently moving my water container so that I can put my bottle on my desk, but out of camera shot. I will also say it is going to be impossible for me to describe this without 100% giving the game away. So I don't even care. I'm just going to tell this story as I need to tell the story. Okay. So it's been interesting listening to you so far because you're talking about transitions and you're talking about palates change, preferences change, availability changes, price changes. That 100% sums up my first pick, which is it has had one life and one legendary life. And I, you also mentioned earlier, how does time work? How do numbers work? How do the years work? I had to look this up. This was discontinued in 2018.
I know where we are. Okay, go ahead.
and was then replaced with an offering that was 1 year older but considerably more in price.
Yep.
And one of the things that I really have been thinking about a lot and really comes up in my conversations with you, my conversations with Jess, even my conversations with consumers, whiskey fans, is that price increases are okay when whiskey has been so cheap for so long. So when I start out, and it was one of my first loves, a Kentucky exclusive that was a 6-year-old bottled in bond, so coming in at 50% alcohol, that was $12 and $13 a bottle, that became $15 a bottle.
15!
Right? It was ludicrous. And then when we complained about that, they said, oh, really, you think that's ludicrous? You don't get this anymore. And so the Heaven Hill 6-year-old bottle and bond was discontinued in 2018. And it was replaced a year later with a 7-year-old bottled in bond from Heaven Hill that was at that point $40 a bottle. And I know that I've talked about the 6-year-old on the podcast. I've talked about the 7-year-old on the podcast. I've talked about that price hike. I have made my peace with that price hike.
So
it is okay in this world for a very good whiskey to be $40. I did a little poking around. In Virginia, it is now $50, but is sold on allocation. I would not have put this bottle in my top 5 if I hadn't just been in California in the last couple of weeks, and it's widely available.
Oh, interesting.
There are a host of things widely available in California. To your point from earlier, if you look around enough, you will find people in California who will ship it to you if it's not available in your state, like me, in Virginia. I also, in poking around, was reminded that the Heaven Hill 7-year-old bottled in bond made the number 4 spot in Whiskey Advocate's 2019 top 20 list.
Oh, I remember that. Right, which was the first year it became available, which was interesting. Oh, number 4 spot. Wow.
Number 4 spot. And so I felt like in making this selection today, I could rule it out because 4 years ago, I was upset by a price hike. I could leave it out because I was upset that the 6-year-old went away. I could leave it out because it's simply not available in Virginia because it's on high allocation. And I thought, nah, it's a damn good whiskey. And I recently tasted it with a bunch of bourbon-loving friends of mine. Yep. And it's cracking. It's a great, great bottle of whiskey. And transitions. Times have changed. Yeah. We need to be okay with things changing, and we can't keep being the guy who says, but it used to be a 6-year-old bottled in bond Kentucky exclusive. No, it's a nationwide 7-year-old for $40. So there you go. Look, live with it.
Yeah.
While I take a little sip of this, you were going to throw in some more.
Well, I think I think $12 to $15 for a 6-year-old bottled and bond whiskey was far too low a price. It was artificially low, and it was kept in one state, and going from 12 to 15 to 40 is a shock, but making it nationally available at $40 for a 7-year-old, like BIB, 50% alcohol, that's not a bad price for a whiskey. And listen, I am one of those guys that when there's a price hike, like when Blanton's went from 35 to 42 to a $60-ish bottle retail price, I said, that's ridiculous. It still tastes like a great $35 to $42 bottle. However, people are going so nuts for it, they're paying $100, $150, $200, $250. And from that perspective, I say, all right, well, I guess I had been buying Blanton's for 10 years at this price. Maybe it's okay it goes up 15 to 20 bucks. So here we are, right? Maybe it's okay that this has gone up the 25 bucks that it needed to go up. You know? Right. And having a glance around the nation, you can find it California, New Jersey, New York, Florida for anywhere between $40 and $50 a bottle. Yeah. So this is what I meant in our rules setup, where it's not widely available, but it is available, and you can find it in places that will ship it to your doorstep. I'll also say it's got a great mouthfeel. It's got this warming quality. It's a kind of a buttery creaminess, but then there's also a bit of cinnamon. There's a little bit of that heat, that spice, that warmth coming in behind it. Sure. Peanuts get mentioned again, right? Yeah. like you can't help yourself there. And then it's a little bit earthy, right? There's a little bit of that grain, that soil, like that cask comes through on this as well. If the remit here is things you reach for the 7-year-old. So I'm at peace with my decision, Joshua. So 2 things, and one of them is a question. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and so I'll mention the first thing, which isn't a question, and then I'll ask my question. Oh shit! At this point, I just forgot my question. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to mention was the 5 whiskeys that I've chosen are ones that haven't fallen victim to the mad craze that is your Blanton's, that is your Elmer T. Lee's, where you can't get it for retail price anymore. These are ones that you surely can get for retail.
Yeah. No, I think we're fully on board with where we're going here, and again, that's why I hesitated. But if Heaven Hill in my journey was the beginning of, and yeah, because I'm a cheap ass Scotsman. But if it's the beginning of, oh no, I'm drinking Heaven Hill 6-year-old and pouring it for friends and pouring it blind for friends, and friends saying, oh man, I don't know what this is, and I'd say, well, what would you pay for it? $25, $30, $35 would come back from people. When Heaven Hill then put out a 7 for $40, and we went, whoa, no, wait, no, you've really broken our relationship here. It doesn't make sense anymore. And I think after 4 years, from 2019 to 2023, we need to be at peace with this change, and available and cracking, and I recommend it.
There you go.
Number 2 for you, Joshua.
So number two, pour. By the way, I did forget the question that I was going to ask you, but I wanted to mention my 5 are in no particular order. This isn't same. This isn't 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is just 5 whiskeys. Okay.
Yep, absolutely the same for me.
Good. So this one is another ubiquitous pour. This one is also at a higher ABV. It's not cask strength, but it is a higher ABV. God, it's so good too. What do I? How do I hint about this? With it, should I just say it? I feel as if I should just say it. I'm just going to say it.
I think so.
This is my absolute go-to bourbon, and it has been for as long as I can remember. And it's Wild Turkey 101. There's just no bones about it. It's remarkably made bourbon, 101 proof, so 50.5% alcohol. I wouldn't call it high rye, but rumor has it has about 13% rye, so there's a good bit of spice coming in. Rumor has it there's about 12% malted barley in there, so you got a bit of nuttiness going around. And then rumor has it once more that it's about 75% corn to round out the mash bill, right? So you've got this good mix of grains to give you sort of a wider array of flavors on this. And the last time I bought this bottle, I'd have to look at the code, and there's a way to decipher the codes. I know our buddy David Jennings knows all about this. But if I remember correctly, it was maybe 2 years ago or so, he had said to me, it's like, dude, pick up some 101 just now. Look at these codes because it's all 8 to 10-year-old liquid. So I'm like, okay. And so that's what I did. I bought 2 or 3 bottles of it at like $24 a pop, something like that. So there you go, $24, 8 to 10-year-old liquid, 101 proof, just an absolute solid drinker that no one's going crazy over. No one's turned this into the highly allocated thing that it could be. And thankfully, this is just like, oh man, it's a no frills drinker, right? That's the great thing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No frills, just solid shit.
Yeah, I've got it sitting in my kitchen right now. It's either something you pour at the end of the workday when you're making dinner, or it's something you pop in a cocktail, and it absolutely works in a Manhattan, in an old fashioned. It's a straight up top quality whiskey, and to your point, yeah, you can walk in the door of any liquor store and take it home with you.
Yeah.
Why do you think it hasn't hit in that way? Is it so ubiquitous? Is it such volume that even a giant uptick in demand still can't knock out its knees, or what?
I wish I knew. I really wish I knew, because it has all of the trappings that could make it this highly allocated thing. It could be down simply to marketing. Campari, while yes, is a global company, I don't think they market in the same way that the parent companies, like Sazerac do, or Beam do, or what have you. It's just, it's not a lifestyle whiskey. I think this is just whiskey, right? Which is kind of, once you throw lifestyle into it, now people are like posturing, like, no, this is just straight up fucking whiskey, man. Drink it. You don't need a crotch shot for Wild Turkey 101. You're just buying Wild Turkey 101.
Right. Do you think there's something generational attached to it? Because I know when we started putting out our Wild Turkey single casks, the number of chaps in their 50s, 60s and above who said, oof, Wild Turkey, that takes me back to college and a few mistakes. And yet talking to 30s and 40-year-olds, there was much more excitement there. Where like, oh yeah, Wild Turkey. It was almost like they could own it without the older generation making it theirs or having it already be theirs. Wild Turkey seemed up for grabs. Yeah. And I speak to so many people in their 30s, 40s, and maybe late 20s who are like, Oh yeah, I've discovered wild turkey, and it's great, and I love it. And they're not saying the same stories from college days.
Yeah.
It's more Jaeger and Firebomb. Firebomb, I'm sorry. Fireball. I maybe said the quiet part out loud there.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe it's destined to be that next one. Listen, you and I never once thought that Springbank would take off the way Springbank has, because it was the distillery that those who really appreciated single malt were like, oh yeah, but have you had Springbank? And I wonder if there's a certain segment of people that are maybe not shouting about it as much as we are right now, are saying, yeah, that's great and all, but let's pour the wild turkey. I think once it catches on, it may fall victim. I'm hoping that's not the case. To your point about the generational thing, could be, but at the same time, I think about, the statement that you made is very similar to the people who say, yeah, I don't drink tequila because it gets me in trouble. Meanwhile, tequila has become, one of the most, or agave spirits have become one of the most, popular spirits out there, period. And that doesn't even include mezcal. I'm talking about all the different tequilas. So, yeah.
But I do think when it comes to bourbon, though, instead of people saying yay or nay to bourbon, they say yes to Eagle Rare. They say nay to Four Roses. They say yay to Wild Turkey. They say nay to something else, right? Yeah. Like, I think people are much more brand specific when it comes to talking bourbon.
That's a good point. This is... When people talk about tequila, they're discussing a category. When we're talking Wild Turkey or Four Roses, we're talking brands within it. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go into my second pick because I've got a question for you about something you just said a second ago. So I am going down the path of my second controversial selection today. I think my controversy is over after this second pick. Once again, in putting together my bourbon journey, I found something that absolutely worked for me, was incredibly special, and came in at absolutely fascinating pricing. Once again, I mean, it was far too low. And it was rare for me to have bourbon that when I went into a retail store, I would look for one thing in particular, right? Yep. And so this for a good number of years has had a special place in my heart. And then it had a period of transition where it won an award, it became insanely popular, it went on allocation, the price spiked on it, and once again, I would not have selected this for my top 5 if I hadn't just been shocked, and I really mean that, shocked, to find this sitting on retail shelves in California.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Okay.
Once again, California to the rescue.
So, what price was it at, and what price is it at now?
So, I would regularly find it for 30. And there were even retailers who would give me a discount on it being 30. Okay. For a bottled and bond single barrel.
So this is McKenna
with a barreled on date and a barrel number.
Yeah, look at you with 2 Heaven Hill products out the gate with the bottled and bond and then the McKenna.
Right? It just hits. It just works. I was so pleased to find bourbon that worked. I enjoyed having an opportunity when when finding myself in bourbon conversations, and I'm talking back before bourbon exploded. This was back when you would be talking to people and they'd be like you just said, like, have you had 101?
Yeah.
You should try 101. And so yeah, it could become something of my own. It then became when I was in Kentucky and I was picking up my 6-year-old bottled in bond. I would have a look at the barreled on dates that were floating around in the same store that I was standing in Kentucky. And for me, again, as a Scotsman, at a time when American brands and American bourbon brands maybe didn't make all the sense in the world to me, single barrel meant something to me. 10-year age statement meant something to me. Cask number, or barrel number in this case, meant something to me. 50% alcohol, that's the old OMC number, old malt cask, right? For that meant something to me. And so I felt a connection there, even if I couldn't have told you it was Heaven Hill. It was Henry McKenna brand. And does Henry McKenna have a bricks and mortar distillery, right? So that connection meant something. To then be in California and to stand next to it on a shelf, and lots of it on the shelf.
At proper pricing?
Was to be like, is it $60, $65? Which
I think is the newer MSRP on that. So there you go.
Right? Yeah, I'm having a little scroll here again. We're seeing available, if not necessarily widely available, but Massachusetts came up as the first result. Is there a Henry McKenna 10-year 100 proof that isn't the single barrel?
I think they're all single barrel. I could be wrong here, but I think Henry McKenna is sort of Heaven Hill's answer to Blanton's, where it's all single barrel, just bottled at 50% rather than 45%, which is Blanton's. So I think that's the sort of equivalent, or at least as close as it gets.
Yeah. I'm certainly finding it. Massachusetts, California, New York, Rhode Island, my friends. Rhode Island has it for $60.
There you go.
New Jersey, and if I've said California, I'll say California again. Yeah, Illinois has it. So that it's in your state too, my friend. It's sitting in Hartford, Connecticut for $65 a bottle.
So can I be a little controversial here?
Oh, absolutely. What would this be without it?
I have yet to have a bottle of Henry McKenna that I've truly loved. I've always liked them and thought it was, that's okay. That's decent. Would I open my wallet for it? Maybe not necessarily. And then, oh man, I have to do this without mentioning names. Then I had a friend who's in charge of cask picks at a shop. And this was maybe 6-ish years ago, maybe 7-ish years ago, who was super proud of the single barrel of McKenna for their shop. And I trust this person's palate. And I said, okay, I'm going to get a bottle. You had hand in picking this. No problem. Yeah. Then I got the bottle. I opened it and poured it. And I thought it was insipid. It was just...
Oh.
There was nothing going on. It was I shouldn't say there's nothing going on. It was just a one-trick pony that maybe would have been great as a component to a larger release. Do you know what I mean? And I said, why? Like, if you want to bottle this because it's a one-trick pony, that's cool. But usually people pick single barrels because it's doing all of the things a marriage of a multitude of casks do, right? It's so expressive and it's doing this and that and the other thing. And he was like, yeah, this is so great. And I thought, I'd happily never pour this again.
Oh, that's such a shame. Yeah, I'm often attracted to, again, I don't particularly like sweet whiskies. I'm not particularly a dessert person. There's a brown sugar warmth that I've found in some of the single barrels that I've experienced with the Henry McKenna that I find very attractive and very appealing. Yeah. Sometimes for me, the corn in bourbon can bring too much vanilla sweetness or buttered popcorn kind of sweetness. And that's what I meant in my introductory comments about sometimes it can be too cloying for me. This brown sugar really, for me, took Henry McKenna to a different place. Yeah. I am coming back to what you said about the 101 with the herbaceousness, right? Yeah. One of the things I've always enjoyed about selecting Casset Wild Turkey is the herbaceous nature of their bourbon. Yeah. And it's got a spice to it as well.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, I've because I'm an old man, I have got a bottled and bond McKenna in front of me right now that is barreled on April 22nd of 2004.
Oh, there you go. Very nice.
I've also got one that was Halloween of, I think, 2003. I've got that floating around.
Bottled. October.
Barreled.
Oh, barreled. Wait, aren't these all 10 years? Oh, 2003, so therefore 2013. Sorry, I forgot that we're in the 2020s and not the 20-teens anymore. So there you go.
I was just saying that to my buddy Roberto at Jack Rose yesterday, where he was talking about putting together, again, talking about Springbank. He was going to put together a decade's tasting of Springbank. And you realize if you were to do that, we've already got 3 offerings from this century alone.
Wow.
Right? We're in the 3rd decade of the 21st century.
God damn it. Thanks for that, Jason.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So to reiterate, you will still find $60, $65 availability. Yeah, it's not $30 anymore. $30 for a single barrel bottled and bond was, again, a ridiculously low price. 60 and 65 doesn't even seem that ridiculous to me. So there you go. There's number 2 for me. That was fun. All right, I'm going to be at ease now because I've put out my 2 controversial picks.
So I don't think I have any controversial picks. However, I will say from here on out, the rest where my first 2 bottles were like, $25-ish. From here on out, we're going to be a bit higher in price. Okay. However, I would argue that the quality you get for the money is still true. The quality you get on the Old Forester rye for 25-ish bucks, maybe 29-ish, somewhere around there, cracking quality. Same with the 101.
I'm with you.
And same with the next one that I'm going to pour in, or actually I have poured it. And this is one that I have 2 bottles of. One bottle sits at my practice space, so whenever Komodo Dragon gets together, I've got a nice pour. And then one bottle that always sits at home so that I can pour it. And it's a rye whiskey. And it's rye. And this is a rye whiskey that I've been reaching for more than any other rye whiskey, maybe in the past year and a half. And it's a somewhat new discovery for me. It is a similar mash bill to the MGP mash bill. Instead of 95.5, it's 94.6.
I'm guessing I know what this one is.
It provides all the same sort of spice and dill and sweet herbaceous qualities that come through in MGP, but there's a heavy earthiness that comes through as well. Like if MGP rye ever had a weakness to it, and I would argue that it has few weaknesses because it's somewhat magical, this really rounds that out. It adds a bit of heft to the overall experience. And it's one of those hefts that I think of when if someone's interested in discovering Speyside whiskeys and they've heard about Glenfarclas, you could pour them the 12. You could pour them the 15 if you have a UK bottling. You could pour them the 17, or you could break out the 105, right? And that's that's the beefy version of Glenfarclas. This is almost like the beefy version of an MGP rye, if that makes sense.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to describe it.
So I'll just give it to you flat out. This is Black Button's rye whiskey.
Yeah.
Right? So
I had that guessed.
Black Button out of Rochester, New York, distilling using local New York grains, 94.6 mash bill. I don't remember if they mentioned, why they didn't go with the classic 95.5. Maybe they just wanted a bit their own. I don't quite remember, but
A little point of difference, yeah.
But while I can't say specifically why this is different, there are a few points. First off, the grain source is different from MGP to Black Button. Also, their distillation style is a combination of pot column, rather than full column still distillation. So you get a little bit of that heaviness coming through in that pot distillation, which you and I as single malt drinkers, maybe our palates are discovering that. Maybe they're clinging on to that aspect of it. Absolutely remarkable mouthfeel. Great drinker as is. Again, if you want a cocktail with it, you can, but it is a $75 bottle. So cocktail with it if you can afford to cocktail with it. If you want just a really solid drinker and you're used to paying X amount of money for, say, some of the older Willet MGPs back when you could afford Willet MGPs, this is going to fit some of those. Like I find a connection between that style of MGP to what Black Button are distilling themselves, right? It's just beefier somehow.
Yeah, I think you raise a valuable point there about pricing, and it was a conversation that I had during the Premier Drams event at Jack Rose. When you compare modern American distilling and new distilleries at that, and a number comes out like $75 for a bottle, and people sometimes say, that's a bit high. The thing I was saying yesterday is, as a new distiller, you're competing with economies of scale.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Right. You can't be, in the case of Black Button, a 10, 11-year-old distillery, and produce whiskey in the same way as our friends at Wild Turkey, right? Our friends at Heaven Hill. The column still that we stood next to at Bernheim, that if it wasn't running 24 hours a day and would burn the skin off your body, you could not wrap your arms around that column still.
Way too long. It was like the width of a VW Bug, just massive.
They are running volumes that are unimaginable. And if new distillation is important to us, and new distilleries are important to us, and those distilleries supporting families in their neighborhoods is important to us, then $75 that makes that a reality is okay. And, as you said previously, if a $12 to $15 price 6-year-old bottled and bond Heaven Hill is artificially low, then we need to work out what the price of a bottle of whiskey is in this country.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes think, if you're a larger producer working with economies of scale and you're now able to say, those new producers are selling it for how much? Maybe there is more money in our product. Maybe we do go north on this. Like, yeah. Maybe you do. Yep. And again, as a proud Scotsman, I'm not really leading the charge on higher pricing. You know, what do we want? Higher prices. When do we want it? Now. It's not that. It's we quote Scott and Becky Harris on this podcast plenty. And talking to Scott and Becky, that they're looking to support families who live in and around their distilleries. That's important. And when we go to the store, we need to support that with our wallets. Yeah. It's not always easy. You made a very good point earlier about the rye being maybe around $25. I did a quick little search. I've got it in Virginia for $28. Okay. If I go in and I look for a Catoctin Creek product, it's not going to be $28. No. They can't produce it for $28. No. They don't have the facilities. They don't have the pay structure. You have to pay more for it, and it has to be important to support that. So an Empire Rye from Black Button that is checking a lot of boxes, that comes in a little higher than other priced bottlings, we have to support that. If we like it, listen, if they're producing not good whiskey, we don't support it with our wallets, right? That's okay. Yeah. Right? It's okay for those not producing good whiskey to maybe go out of business, you know? It still needs to be a meritocracy, but we can't let distilleries who are producing good stuff fail because they're putting out a fair-priced, small-scale whiskey. Yeah,
and to your point, you're employing people with your money, right? It's the people at the distillery, but it's also the people at the local farms. It's their local malt stir. It's so many people down the line that when you're supporting these distilleries, you're helping to feed families, and that's part of the reason why I was okay putting two different ryes here at two different price points, because they're telling two very different stories, and each has their own value. And
I like that. I like that a lot. Yep. I think, and it's been interesting because in putting together our Scotchies list, price was important, availability was important. There was still Glenfarclas on it. There was still Springbank on it. There was still Compass Box, right? Yeah. My $35 Glasgow blend. There's a pretty wide variety in American distilling right now. And, when you and I were speaking last week, deciding this was going to be the next episode of the podcast, it was, is it going to be bourbon specific? Is it going to be rye specific? Is it going to be American single malt specific? And it was important to me that it was American. Yeah. And I think you've absolutely hit a home run today on here's two American ryes at two different price points doing two different things. I think that really captures what I wanted to achieve with this sharing of lists. So kudos to you this day, Joshua Hatton.
I feel like a champion just now. Jason, thank you.
There you go. You take a second. You pat yourself on the back.
There we go. I promise you that's
just don't pull anything. That's exactly it.
Almost there. Yep. Okay, good.
Put it away now.
Okay.
Put your neck away. A quick glance. I know I just told you about the price on my Old Forester rye in Virginia. I've got a store with 8 bottles 10 miles from me. I've got a store with 9 bottles, 10 bottles, a store with 15 bottles 27 miles away from me. This is widely available Old Forester rye.
And you're saying $28?
$28 before tax.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go. So, I mean, usually I buy 2 bottles at a time. So, I wonder if this was maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago that I bought these. I go through whiskey kind of slowly because I think I spent maybe $25.99 on my Old Foresters, though I've seen it for less in other spots. So
for sure.
So there you go.
For sure.
Yep.
All right. I'm currently looking at the bottle that I just put on my desk, and I am 3 bourbons in a row. I have surprised myself this day.
There you go. So we're on number 4. Your penultimate whiskey, right? Or
this is my third.
oh, because I went first. Yes. Okay. I'm soon to be on my penultimate. Got it.
So let me say widely available. Let me say in the state of Virginia, my local store that's just a few miles away has 5 of these. Another store in the same town, has 9. Another store in the same town has 8. Another store in the same town has 6.
Oh, wow.
I'm sitting literally no more than 3 miles from 3, 4, 6 packs of this product. So, yeah, gosh, we are talking widely available.
Okay.
I could tell you the first person who turned me onto this, but that would definitely give away the game. You reiterated what the first person had said, and that led to my purchase of this. Give me a second here. I was sitting here savouring this Henry McKenna barreled in 2004, so let me just pop that over my throat.
Glug, 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 glug.
And I'm going to... So here, I'm trying to be careful with the
I don't see
camera
anything
here.
Yeah.
Oh, one single flash of this and it will give the game away. So I'm going to keep that there.
Look at you being so careful on the camera.
All right, there you go. That's out there. All right. Oh! Look how close it is. That's my wrist. All right. I have it poured. Beautiful, beautiful dark color.
It's American whiskey. It's gonna be a dark color.
I just threw that in for Jess.
For Jess? Yeah. Explain the color to Jess. It's bourbon in color. Yeah, so give me some notes.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't done enough notes. We've done a lot of explaining why the selections, but we haven't done enough notes, I think. So give me some nose and some tasting notes.
It's phenomenal. It's another warm one, and it's that getting a sense of myself and what have I ended up being attracted to in the world of bourbon. And it's warmth, it's brown sugar, it's maple syrup. The legs on it are phenomenal. An amazing oiliness to it in the glass.
Is it?
I'm hopefully not misleading the witness here, but it is a hint herbaceous. But I don't say that to try and mislead you. Emphasis is on hint.
Are we talking a Kentucky bourbon?
Yes, sir.
I'm talking Kentucky. Is this going to be a third Heaven Hill product in a row? Do you just have a flavor profile that you go with?
Heaven Hill is now behind me. I used it for my 2 small C controversial picks.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Here for the pal here. Let's get some more.
All right. That's Jason taking a sip. That's him appreciating his sip. Swishing it, chewing it, contemplating it, slapping it, flipping it, rubbing it down. Oh, yes. What you got, Jason? Oh, yeah, I like this. Gosh. There's a lot going on. You're usually not at a loss for words. So there must be enough going on.
Really excellent. There's like an oatmeal raisin cookie quality going on here. Good warmth, good alcohol on this. This is why we have a third bourbon in our roll, because we've gone bottled in bond 50, another bottled in bond 50, and this is above 50.
Are we talking cask strength? Or thereabouts.
Yes. So it's more of an historical proof.
Oh. Did you pour Wild Turkey 101, or is this a Russell single barrel pick?
The label says the typical barrel proof at that time prior to bottling was 115.
Okay, so this is Wild Turkey.
The label says that.
It's Wild Turkey.
Oh, it is not.
Oh, it is not.
It is not.
Okay.
No, it is not.
Because they've moved up to 115. They were at 107, then they went to 110, then they went to 115. So this is a barrel entry of 115.
Well, it does say, the sentence does say the typical barrel proof at that time prior to bottling was 115.
Oh.
So they wouldn't necessarily have put it in at 115 if maturation would have taken it up.
Okay.
It is so rich. That is, I tell you, if you poured this for me blind, I wouldn't think it was a Scotch, but it has the richness that I associate with Scotch, and it has none of the buttered popcorn or not even vanilla. There's not even a lot of vanilla here. If anything, there's vanilla bean rather than vanilla extract. Like, there's a richness, there's a heft, there's a depth. Yeah, if I could show you this bottle, you would see that I have 1/4 remaining in this bottle, and I purchased this maybe in the last 12 months, 18 months, which I think is me going through a bourbon really quickly.
Fast. Yeah. So, okay. So let me ask you this. If the normal proof is 115, do they maybe bottle this at 114? Is it old granddad 114?
No, this is bottled at 115 proof.
Oh, it's bottled at, what is that? God, you're making me do ABV.
57.5.
57.5 as a standard bottling ABV for a Kentucky bourbon.
God damn, that is so good. And guess what? There's cherry Coke on the finish. That's an occasional little treat for me. If I'm driving, so I'm not a soda drinker. I was saying this earlier. Like, I don't really like sweet or desserts that much. If I'm driving a distance, I will get a Coke at a gas station when I stop to fill up. And sometimes I will get a cherry Coke. And it's a little bit perverted, but I just got cherry Coke on the finish there. That was really excellent. All right, let me tell you, because we still got 4 whiskeys to get through. If I tell you the first person to suggest this as a go-to whiskey, get your foie ready, listeners, was Will Oldham, a.k.a. Bonnie Prince Billy. And you had said to me, maybe within the week, you really should get some Old Forester.
There you go.
It really is as good as Will says. That's it, man.
How many people get to say, well, it was when I was hanging out with Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, the world-famous Americana musician. Wow. Old Forester, so 1920, Prohibition.
Yeah.
Yep.
So incredibly available in the great state of Virginia, bottled at 57.5% alcohol. It's currently... There's $5 off in the state of Virginia. Normally $62 a bottle. Currently $57 a bottle.
Yeah.
You cannot argue with that. Rich, unctuous, wonderful depth to it. Great heft. Why would you not buy this? This is an absolute home run. So cheers, Will. Cheers, Joshua. And listeners, if you don't know it, get to know it. Spot on.
Here's something interesting. When I was talking about the Old Forester rye, I mentioned cherry. You mentioned cherry, and wouldn't you know, I have a bottle next to me of a Old Forester single barrel, bottled for Julio's, and look at the name of it. Cherry bomb.
Cherry bomb.
Cherry bomb. So yeah, I think just as many Scotch whiskey distilleries, claim to have a signature note. I wonder if cherry is Old Forester's signature note. So there you go. Beauty, man.
I'm sorry, I'm still sitting sipping this, and I am just in love. Yep. I can see why I polished off 3/4 of that bottle. Yeah. I love it when people quote this to me when we see them at festivals or they send in a message or what have you. But pop the cork on a Friday, recycle the bottle on a Monday, like that. Hashtag please drink the whole bottle responsibly. That's a corker. That's really good. All right, Joshua, your penultimate.
Right, penultimate whiskey is to my left, soon to be in my glass. Mm-hmm. And now this one's got a multitude of things going on, and that's because it's not made in what is, when we think of traditional American spirits, this is anything but traditional. However, I would argue it is wholly American.
Okay. You have my attention. Now, can you hold it?
Oh, you got to know when to hold it, know when to fold it. So on this one, how do I? Well, let me give you some notes. There's on the nose. There's a hint of smoke, but one could argue as they smell it, that could be some significant barrel char coming through, because on top of it, you've got it's vanilla driven with that smoke. So it could be char. You dig a little deeper and there's like there's an earthy sweetness to it, like a sweet soil, like that. That sweetness you get from potting soil. That's right.
Yes, very much so.
That's coming through.
Was I
there
too
as
eager
well.
there? I was very ready to answer that question.
Oh man, but it's
my wife does a lot of planting, and so there's potting soil around us continually.
Go easy.
And not to brag.
Just so long as you're not incorporating potting soil into your lovemaking. You keep it clean. It's hard to keep it clean when you're dealing with potting soil, but
I know, right? Gets right under your fingernails.
Oh, now this is a term that our good friend Balancer does not really connect with. Balancer, a.k.a. Anthony Rivera. You corrected me one time. Anyway, our one of our favorite Massachusetts guys, he does not like this word, and I can only describe it as incredibly rich on the nose.
Which I just said for the Old Forester, right? Like I kept saying it. I just know that he doesn't like it. He wants to know the context in which it's used.
Yeah. It's just like it's a heft, it's a weight. I would argue this is an incredibly expressive nose. It's slightly lower ABV than the last whiskey that I had. Slightly. You're looking at 46% alcohol here. Let me give it.
This is so fun. This is just like the Scotch episode. You and I have taken such similar journeys, because my fourth is about to lower the ABV as well. I thought that was a strange transition, and you and I have both done it.
The smoke is clear. This is smoke. It's a bit of peat going on. Hints of subtle hints of like cocoa. I would argue there's some chocolate covered bananas with the nuts on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This
Sounds dirty when you say it.
crushed nuts. Ouch. The texture is great. It's almost, again, it's a silky texture to it. It is not a traditional, again, I mentioned this at the top of this. This is not a traditional style of American whiskey. However, traditions change and new traditions begin. And maybe this tradition will be codified by the end of 2023.
So, a chocolatey new tradition waiting on ratification.
Mm-hmm. With a bit of smoke.
Have you pulled something from our friends at Westland?
Ding, ding, ding. That's a bingo.
Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just say bingo. Bingo! How fun!
And it is?
It's their flagship American whiskey. It's their new one. And what's funny is I looked at our last list of top 5 single malts, and this was on my list of top 5 single malts. So it's not only making the list of top 5 single malts, it's making the list of top 5 American whiskeys. This shit's remarkable. Like, to not have it on the list would be a sin against the list. That's what I will say.
Well, you've just saved the listener 20 minutes because that's my 5th pick.
That's your 5th pick. Okay.
Yeah. And again, these were in no particular order. I was just closing out with an American single malt that needs to be on every shelf as well. So, okay, there we go. So you're 4 and my 5. Yeah, right. But again, so let me say this, because I think this is an exciting development.
Yeah.
And if anyone from Westland is listening in, and we will say hello, Anna. If anyone's listening in, it's not going to sound like a good development. But I've been thinking about this over the last 24 hours. And a little before that as well, since the last time I poured for my Palouse group as well. We've reached a stage where people are comfortable saying they don't like the Westland mash bill. They don't like the chocolate malt.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think when you reach a point where instead of people saying, oh, that's American single malt, oh, that's interesting, all right, okay. People now have other American single malts where they can say, I like their single malt, right?
Yeah.
Look, what have we done in Scotland for fucking ever, right?
Yep.
Not everybody likes all the distilleries in Scotland. Yep. Scotch is still an incredibly strong category, and some of the things that I don't like, you might like, or they don't like, they like. That's all to the good. What's also interesting, and for Westland people, I will bring this back around, there are also those who love the mash bill and support the mash bill and pontificate upon the mash bill. And so it's okay that the thing that some people love, some people don't. That is okay. And when you read up on the flagship, they talk about 10 years in the making, right? Their history is still incredibly fresh. Yeah. And in 10 years, they've reached a point where they are one of, maybe being careful here. One of, if not the de facto American single malts, to the point where you put it on the Scotch / single malt list. And now today you put it on the American list, right? That is an incredibly special place for Westland to sit. And in all of our dealings with Westland over the last 10 years, we've been excited by them. We have talked them up. We've represented that distillery to the best of our abilities. And it's absolutely present. There's no doubt about that. And ratification will only help.
And one of the things that I love about Westland, it ties back to what I was saying about Black Button. You know, it's clear this is a distillery, a group of people within a distillery that give a shit about local agriculture, about independent farmers, about specialty grains that are outside of the commodity market that don't just bring interesting flavor to whiskey, but actually help agriculture and help soil. This is something you and I have been talking about this season.
Absolutely.
And is it a $75 bottle? Yes, it is a $75 bottle. But back to our point before, this is double pot still, single malt whiskey. It's not produced in a continuous column still. That's the width of a VW bug. You know, this is... It's a small distillery that has the capacity that's slightly smaller than Kilchoman Distillery. I think they're at 500,000 liters, 450, something like that.
Yeah, is that right?
You know, so $75 is not far off the mark when you compare it to other non-age stated single malts on the market, be it American or Israeli or Scottish or Welsh, and the list goes on. So I think the price is good. I think the people are good. They give a shit about what they're doing, and they care about their local community. And these are all things when I think about how I'm going to spend my money, like our relationship with them aside, this is a distillery I want to support. Period.
But so anybody who's seen The Bear on Hulu.
I'm 3 episodes into season 1. I know. Yes.
Phenomenal.
It's intense,
phenomenal.
Man. Intense.
There's a quote in one of the episodes where one of the characters says, "I'm not like this because I'm in Van Halen. I'm in Van Halen because I'm like this." Right?
Ah.
And so when you just said a second ago, right, our relationship aside, we are invested in Westland, I would spin that around. I would say we're invested in Westland because of what they produce and how they do it, right?
Yeah.
We have a relationship with them because of what we encountered. And so, you know, again, going back to my Sunday, talking to Roberto at Jack Rose, he and Harvey Fry, you know, the famous, even though he absolutely never, ever wanted to be in whiskey circles, Harvey Fry. When Roberto and Harvey, who had tasted whiskey through the 80s and the 90s and into the early 2000s, when they tasted Kilchoman New Make, they said to each other, we need to be all in on this distillery today, right? This is the future. When you and I first tasted Westland, we said we need to be all in on this distillery today because this is the future. And to only see where they've gone in this 10 years, 11 years, 12 years is remarkable. I want to put this out for our listeners because I called it up on my screen because this was going to be my 5th pick. One of the things I love about this flagship, they did away with the American Oak solo release, the Sherry Oak solo release, and the peated solo release. So they could put out a flagship that says, this is our distillery in a bottle. And so if you go to their website, the cask types in flagship are American Oak, new American Oak, used American Oak, first fill ex-bourbon, first fill ex-Oloroso hoggies and butts, and second fill ex-Oloroso hoggies and butts. That's everything they've got sitting in the distillery, right? And then the grain bill is Washington Select Pale Malt, Munich, Extra Special, Pale Chocolate, Brown Malt, and Baird's Heavily Peated Malt. That's everything they've got at the distillery, right? You are absolutely getting Westland in a bottle when you pick up the flagship. And I think that speaks volumes. Quick Virginia update for you, Joshua. Our stores do have the American single malt, $70 a bottle. They are also, and I'm careful to say this before this episode drops, they are also closing out American oak, sherry oak, and peated individual releases, and they are all... Oh, actually, that's not true. The peated and the sherry are $40 a bottle currently, and the American oak is $35 a bottle.
Run, don't walk. Bring a suitcase.
So,
holy cow.
So as you and I are busy saying it's okay for whiskey to go up in price, it's okay for whiskey to represent modern numbers, to see those 40s and 35s in the state of Virginia, I'm like, yep, don't mind if I do.
Oh, man.
So.
Those are... Once a larger group of people discover the magic of Westland, those that have stocked up on these older bottlings they're going to be sitting on gold, like absolute gold. Oh my gosh, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So there might be a little run happening around the great state of Virginia.
Yep.
Let me close out. So now that you and I have absolutely paired up, but we didn't do that in the Scotch episode, and yet here we've absolutely paired up on this in the or Scotch/single malt episode. Here we are in the American episode, absolutely pairing up on that. So I will close you out by describing a distillery that is near and dear to our hearts, that produces a style of spirit that is near and dear to our hearts, that this particular style doesn't follow my first three bourbon picks or close out like my American single malt pick. I vacillated. I had two options for this spot, and because I went with two available options for my first two picks, I went with widely available for my third and fourth picks.
Okay.
I am currently within 22 miles of 46 of these bottles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So not on allocation, widely available. Now this is a drop in ABV for me. I am looking at 90 proof here. I did have... I shouldn't say too much as I move away from my mic. My second option for this slot was coming in at 52% alcohol or 104 proof. And I didn't feel like that was a significant enough difference for me to move away from the age statement on the 90 proof offering. That once again, we saw this with the Old Forester 1920 Prohibition offering, where it was almost $1 per ABV. This fourth selection for me in the state of Virginia is $45, coming in at 45% ABV.
And it's age stated?
And it's 6 years old.
Okay. 45% alcohol, 6 years old.
Can you think of the style if it's not bourbon and it's not American single malt?
It's got to be rye.
It's my first on the list. It's amazing to me in putting this list together that I don't have more rye on this list, but
yeah,
I felt like the bourbons were doing what I want them to do and what I want to recommend to people. Then I've got this one, and then it was closing out with the Westland flagship. So I feel like this... But like I say, there were two offerings for this slot. They're both ryes, and they're both from the same distillery. There's only a 45% to 52% alcohol difference. and there's an age statement on the 6 and no age statement on the 52.
So I know the exact distillery, and I know the bottling. I want to hear why you've selected this. Like, what about the flavors? Yeah, see, now, yep. So there you go. Should I announce it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
because I just finished the pour while we were talking.
Yeah, it's Wild Turkey Rye. It's the 6-year-old, right? 45%.
Yeah.
Just absolutely, for me, it's a no-brainer, easy drinker rye that is, if you love Wild Turkey bourbon, you make the connection to the rye. They're both clearly Wild Turkey.
Exactly.
Is that why you love it?
Exactly.
Okay.
It is, because to the point I was making a moment ago, enjoying our Wild Turkey bourbon selections and drinking Wild Turkey bourbon is because it's got that herbaceousness to it. It frames it quite nicely with a little hint of the dill. To then step into the rye is to flip the script and to give the herbaceousness the front seat. And I like that component of it. The label here talks about complex allspice, pepper, and almond. You know, there is this idea of stepping down in ABV. It is still decently oily in the glass. The legs on this are still extended. On the nose, maybe a little lighter than, say, the Old Forester Prohibition. The palate, maybe a little lighter in that regard as well. But I think for a daily drinking or easily reached for rye, I don't think it's got the same level of spice as you might find in some other ryes. But I think that soft herbaceousness really carries it. And I think the connection to the Wild Turkey distillery is really important here as well.
And
it's so easy. Oh, there's the almond, And there's the almond that they're talking about on the label.
The mash bill for Wild Turkey Rye is kind of unusual. Like, obviously, the legal minimum is 51% rye to be a rye whiskey, but most ryes tend to be, well, definitely in the 60s, and then you've got 75, 80, the most common one with MGP being, 95.5 rye malted barley. With Wild Turkey, it is 51% rye, 37% corn, and then the rest being barley. So it's the most unrye rye while being a rye.
which again, to give a couple of honourable mentions, there's a brand called Hochstadter's. And they do a 50% ABV rye that really brings the spice. And I like that a lot. It's not a standalone, and so I didn't want to include it today.
Oh, I know the...
But in that...
I know the bottling you're talking about. The twisted neck has sort of a...
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's in Mahusi. And so they're a go-to. Earlier when we were talking, the Rittenhouse is a go-to, right? I said I've got the Old Forester Rye in my house. That's a great one to reach for as well. I just think, again, if you like the people, the people, you work with the people, there's a way in which we think about the Wild Turkey Distillery as a place we get to go to, sometimes once a year, sometimes twice a year. It's exciting going down there. It's exciting seeing friends down there. And to then pick up the Russell's Reserve Kentucky straight rye whiskey, 6-year-old, is a connection to that. But it's also good. And when people locally reach out and they say, hey, I've got a friend who loves whiskey, I want to get them a nice gift. What would you recommend? And I say, well, what's your budget? If it's sub 50, I'm recommending Wild Turkey, I'm recommending Russell's Reserve. I'm sending them down the path. Well, do you like it a little spicy, a little peppery? Well, not too much, maybe a little bit. Here's something interesting. If they already drink bourbon, maybe they'd like this little twist on it. the difference between the straight rye 6 at 45 and the straight rye single barrel at 52 is $20. Takes you from 45 to 65. For people who don't want to go above $50 for a gift, that single barrel's out of it, but I think you still get incredible quality with the 6-year-old. And at 45, you and I have talked about this, and we encounter this a lot. There are people who like bourbon a whole lot who never go above bottled and bond, right? And so there is that, like, here's a 45, here's a 90 proof for you that isn't going to blow the doors off where some other things might. And it's $45. So I think that's a go-to. That's a reacher. You said that earlier as well, right? It's an easy reached for rye that pleases so well. So I'm pleased with that. Honorable mention goes to the single barrel at 52.
Yeah,
if you want to treat yourself at 65, go crazy.
I've reached around for that plenty of times. It's been real nice. Anyway,
before we get out of here,
so we have my fifth one, my fifth and final whiskey, because I did my 4,
right?
And then you're like, oh, your 4 is my 5. Your peanut butter fell into my chocolate. Your chocolate fell into my peanut butter. So my fifth one, right? Did I do that? Old Forester Rye, Wild Turkey 101, Black Button Rye, Westland Flagship. And my fifth one.
All right. I'm going
to give this just a little wee pour. Now, the first time I had this whiskey was in the form of a single cask. And I fell so in love with this particular single cask that I made sure to get 2 other bottles for myself. And then I think I've purchased at least another 6 bottles of it for people in my local group. And after falling in love with that particular single cask, I said, well, let me see what their standard offering is on this, because they have a non-cask strength, non-single cask version of it. And I would argue we go from being absolutely remarkable and off the beaten path from a flavor profile perspective to remaining off the beaten path from a flavor profile perspective, but now a somewhat everyday drinker, or at the very least, it's one of those ones where you're like, oh, you've got to try this, and it's not gonna burn your mouth out with alcohol, right? It's, again, back to your people who are like, 90 proof is okay because not everybody can do, BIB and above, right? So this is just a fantastic everyday drinker. It's got notes of cranberry or lingonberry. There's a gentle sort of, how should I say this? Poorly. It's really malty. It's incredibly malty and citrusy, natural citrus quality to it.
Okay.
and it's got
we're in the realm where we could be talking about anything.
It's got a slightly unusual color to it. It's almost like a deep pink in color.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to show you the bottle, because once I show you the bottle, you'll be like, oh, of course, because they have a very specific bottle shape that it is unlike anybody else's bottle.
Is it Angel's Envy?
And it is not Angel's Envy, though. No, right? Because they're still working off MGP liquid or sourced liquid. This is their own distillate. And remember, it's incredibly malty.
And that was 100% the part that kept me away. But pinky, and their own very unique bottle, I couldn't stay away from Angel's Envy, even with all the malty chat. Very malty, pink. Are we in another American single malt here?
We are back into, yes, we're remaining in single malt.
Very malty?
Yes.
Oh, I know exactly who you picked. Man, talk about a brain fart. All right. Is this Westward?
So this is Westward standard Pinot Noir cask finish.
If I can pause you there just for a second.
One Mississippi.
I had the most interesting experience at the Premier Drams.
Okay.
So I brought in our Virginia Distillery Company STR cask, our Westland, our peated Westland in Pinot de Charon, our Woodinville bourbon, and our 6-year-old Westward New Charred Oak single cask. And to a person, the individuals who tasted the Westward all paused.
Yes.
And looked at their glass and looked at me and looked at the bottle and said, that is so interesting. That is not like anything else.
Yep.
And I thought of you each time. I thought of Elijah each time.
Johnny was there too, picking.
Johnny, right? Like, there's something to Westward that is not like the others. I will also use this moment to say there were a number of people who said Westland, Westward. I thought those were the same distillery, and I was misremembering the word. And I had to keep saying, Westland is in Seattle, Westward is in Portland, Oregon. Like, very different, somewhat different projects happening in each place, but both American single malt. And so there was a bit of explanation going on. But folk found Westward to be incredibly interesting. So to know about your love affair with this bottling that you have selected today, but would you argue this was maybe a more esoteric Westward that you selected?
I wouldn't necessarily call it esoteric. It's sort of part of their standard range now, I think, where they've got their standard single malt. They've got their Pinot Noir, they have a stout cask, and then they have a cask strength.
So I jumped ahead then. I thought you were actually naming the exec's single cask selection.
So that was my point. Like that, it was the exec's one, which was my whiskey of the year last year. Or my non-SCN whiskey of the year last year. Not because it was the best whiskey in the world, but because of exactly what the people who came to your table said. That's interesting. That's unlike anything else I've tasted. And isn't that why you and I got into whiskey? Isn't that why you and I started a company? To show flavors people were not familiar with, to just expand people's horizons. And that's what this whiskey does.
Yep. Somebody asked me at Premier Drams, why do you do what you do? And that was my exact answer. It's to explore the world of whiskey and put things in front of the nation that we think are worth their time and are engaging. Yeah. That's a really exciting selection you made. So your list of 5 has got 2 ryes telling 2 different stories, 2 American single malts, and 1 bourbon. And none of them are 4 roses, which brings me back to a question that I did not ask you, which was, as I was going into my Henry McKenna single barrel selection, I thought for sure you would make reference to 4 roses and the number of single barrels you've acquired from 4 roses over the year. And a 4 roses didn't even make it into your top 5.
No, it didn't. And it's, Yeah, I guess that's kind of interesting. I mean, if I'm being very honest, from how should I say this again poorly? I I think what Four Roses are doing from a bourbon production standpoint is perhaps some of the most interesting production there is when it comes to bourbon, because you've got the different mash bills and the different yeasts. So really, 10 different styles of bourbon, plus all of the rick houses are single floor. So they're really relying on the yeast. They're really relying on the mash bills to change things up. The variety of flavors is quite astonishing from a bourbon perspective. But I don't necessarily reach for small batch. As good as it is, I don't necessarily reach for it all the time. Do I reach for the single barrels? Yes, I do, but I stopped buying them once they went past $70 a bottle. And it's not because I don't think it's worth $80 some of these are single cast, 12 years old. Like, would we pay $100+ if it were Scotch whiskey? Hell yes, we would. Is Four Roses worth it? If it's up your alley, hell yes, it is. But I've got more than I'd like to announce here on the podcast, and I don't need to buy anymore. And some of them I've purchased at $49, and so if this were 10 bottles on my list and 10 bottles on your list, damn straight, there would have been a Four Roses here, and I may have mentioned something that was my specific mash, which is OBSF, and maybe a 50%er. That's if I'm looking around, there are a lot of single barrels at 50% with the varying mash bills, and if I see an OBSF and I know I'm low, like I'll definitely grab that.
We know you're not low, Joshua. We know that.
Anyway.
You're stalked into the next century. Listen, before we get out of here, I just want to say a quick word on the casks that we most recently had bottled. And I had 4 of them sent through to Premier Drams so that I could pour them for Nation members, for One Nation Under Whiskey listeners who came by. I will also say that having a password of Harvey Fry for an under the bottle pour was hugely
You think you mean under the
successful.
Table pour?
Oh yeah, what did I say?
Under the bottle pour.
Yeah, I thought I said
By
that.
the end of the night, you're
I'm
under
looking
the
at
bottle.
I'm looking at these bottles on my desk thinking, okay, I need to talk about these bottles. A Harvey Fry password for an under the table pour was hugely successful, and there was a lot of remembrances for Harvey Fry. There's talk about an event in the spring of next year celebrating the life of Harvey Fry. At Jack Rose, and so we'll keep people abreast of that on the podcast. But I have to say, Virginia Distillery Company, 5-year-old in STR, people loved it as a follow-up to our Spanish Oak Butt first release. I told people to their faces, anyone who supported the Spanish Oak Butt will have the first opportunity to purchase the STR, and that went over very well. I poured the peated Westland in Pinot de Charon. People loved it. Told them that will be sold via lottery. They understood. We have done lottery selections for our Westlands previously. The Woodinville 6-year-old Washington State bourbon was very well regarded. People were excited. People knew about it. I'm pouring in Washington, D.C. People knew Woodinville. It wasn't a surprise to them. It didn't come out of left field. They didn't say Washington State bourbon, ? It was all to the good. I told them that will be available to members of the nation who previously supported our Black Button selection. Black Button, they made it into your top 5 today. People totally understood, so that is good. on that Westland lottery, I did tell people previous support of the nation will be important in joining the lottery. People understood, right? We got to support members of the nation. If you've previously purchased from us, that will get you into the lottery. I had more than one person at Premier Drams say, oh, I got to get some orders in then so that I'm eligible for the lottery. Yep. And I said, yes, you do. And then our Westward, our Portland, Oregon single malt that is a particular favourite of yours, Joshua, was deemed to be incredibly interesting by people who tasted it on the day. And that will become available as we move through some of the sales on some of these other, follow-up bottlings. Yeah. We'll then have a grand release for our Westward. I will then say my last word before we really do get out of here is we are scheduling a November 5th live podcast and Westland cask selection at the distillery. And there will be a follow-up email to people in Seattle and known supporters of Westland in Chicago and New York and Dallas and parts of California to say, if you can get on a plane, oh, geez, I just left out Scotland. The person in Scotland already knows what's going down.
Jason.
So already knows. Oh, she's not learning about this from the podcast. She already knows.
She's learned a lot about you just now, though.
So November 5th is going to be, it's our SCN involvement at the Westland Distillery is going to coincide with the launch of Gariana 8, which... How does time work, Joshua? We're already on to Gariana 8.
Amazing.
They grow up so fast.
So for the event on November 5th, it's just a matter of, remember the 5th of November. And how can people get tickets to it?
They will receive an email from Single Cask Nation.
Beauty. Cool. Okay.
It's going to be a little bit of protecting those people, but I want local Seattle people to be able to come out and support one of their local Seattle distilleries.
There you go. Yep.
2 casks, not mentioned, not poured, not tasted, because outturns are low, bottle availability is very low. We have 2 wild turkeys. Everybody wanted to talk to me about wild turkey at Premier Drams.
Yeah.
So wild turkey is coming. The price is going up. Lottery is only open to people who have supported Single Cask Nation and acquired bottles. We do have bottles on the website, singlecasknation.com. Please do make your purchase so you're eligible for the lottery. We would love to be able to send you some winning Single Cask Nation wild turkey that you purchase.
There you go.
After winning. I tell you, man, I also poured the Copperworks that's sitting on our website. And so many people, I had one woman who'd said, that is so piney. And I said, absolutely. That connects hop oil for me. There's no hop oil in here. There are no hops in the mash. It's piney. It's citrusy. I don't know where it comes from, but I absolutely love it. She was on board. Other people tasted the Copperworks and loved how different it was, how fresh it was, how citrusy it was. So
Beauty.
It continues to be a cracking release.
Beauty. I love hearing all that. It's always great to hear Single Cask Nation members, One Nation Under Whiskey listeners come tasting our whiskeys and telling us what they think. So that's great. So
absolutely.
Listen, we do have to get out of here, unfortunately. We've got some amazing guests coming up in future episodes, as well as some really interesting emails that came through. James Foster being one of the people that emailed maybe 3 times. So he's like, guys, pay attention to me. So we've got to pay attention to him. But
I've got some cocktail chat from my time with Gabby that I want to return to as well, but that'll come up another day also. Well,
there you go. On all of that, I've got to get out of here. You've got to get out of here. Let's get out of here. To all of the winners on our top 10 American whiskeys, congrats to you, and And cheers to you, Jason. Cheers to the listener.
Cheers, Joshua. Cheers, listeners. And cheers to our 10 selections. All wonderful. Let's get out of here. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Chin chin.
Chin-chins.